How safe is long-term prednisone under 10 milligrams a day long-term? Great question, because some people just get stuck there and feel that there's nothing they can do. So I wanted to share the story of prednisone warrior Shelly. She is a physical therapist, and she wanted to know what I thought of her situation and the dose she is currently stuck at and what she should do. So let me share what her story is, and then my advice at the end about what her risks truly are, whether it's worth it, and what to consider in deciding whether it's worth it. All right, this is how her email to me went. Dear Dr. Megan, thank you for sending me this. I have been dependent on prednisone for over 10 years to manage psoriatic arthritis, but I believe that I take a low dose. I have tried multiple biologic medications and DMARDs for the autoimmune arthritis, but I also have systemic mastocytosis, which I believe makes it harder to manage my symptoms. I actually have a long list of diagnoses, many of which are autoimmune. 2 years ago, my arthritis symptoms were very well controlled, so my rheumatologist finally convinced me to try to wean off prednisone. I was alternating between 5 to 10 milligrams daily at the time, basically an average of 7.5 milligrams a day, right? I have tried every possible way to taper and multiple different medications and supplements to make the transition work, but my withdrawal symptoms were horrendous. If I took less than 7.5 milligrams of prednisone daily, I slept up to 20 hours per day. I had suicidal ideation, but not enough energy to kill myself. I was cognitively impaired, dizzy, lightheaded, and had to stop driving for a month while trying to get used to taking only 6.5 milligrams. She only dropped 1 milligram. I actually love prednisone, and it totally helps me function as a full-time healthcare provider while taking 7.5 milligrams with an effective biologic. I was diagnosed with osteopenia prior to starting prednisone, and now my DEXA scan report says I have normal bone density. I lose weight on higher doses of prednisone and have no problems keeping my weight under 145 pounds on 7.5 milligrams daily. I am 5'5" and I can stay active on this dose. I am no longer a triathlete, but I have done pretty well on this dose. My doctors are always trying to get me to lower the prednisone dose, but I would be disabled on a lower dose. And the depression that I get with lowering the dose is dangerous. Some doctors have told me that the prednisone is going to kill me, but I am more interested in quality of life than quantity at this point. I am 47 years old, and I would love to know your opinion on long-term prednisone under 10 milligrams a day in my situation. Thanks for what you do, Shelly. And this is my email response to Shelly. I said, hi, Shelly. My goal is always finding the best dose for each person that balances the risks and benefits. It sounds like you've found that for you. You're on the lowest effective dose for you. Own it. Don't feel ashamed. You've tried to go lower and it didn't work. You're an effective person serving others at this dose, and it's not that high. Thanks for reaching out, Dr. Megan. And then I got her permission to share her story. And she said, I appreciate your response. Sometimes I feel like my rheumatologist just needs to check off a box that says, urged patient to reduce prednisone dose, or says it so he can sleep well at night. Thank you so much for what you do. It's difficult, very difficult to find research on low doses of prednisone, but physicians are so against long-term use of anything greater than 5 milligrams. It seems like no one wants to do research on low-dose prednisone since it's so cheap, and pharmaceutical companies that make buco bucks on biologic drugs wouldn't want anyone to know if low doses of prednisone are not that bad for you. Please feel free to share my story, but I would like to be anonymous, so I did change her name. And then I replied to that. Hi, Shelly. I totally agree. No one is willing to pay for that kind of research, so we don't know what we don't know. Thanks for your permission to share. I'll keep you anonymous. Okay, so that message I received about 5 months ago. And since then, I got to go to Harvard Medical School for a seminar on prednisone and diseases that people take prednisone for. And it was an amazing experience to learn from the world's experts on these conditions and this drug. And I learned something there that is really relevant to the situation that I didn't know when I replied to her. And it's especially regarding the studies that have been done I agree that it's very hard to find studies, but these doctors had done the research and found the studies and analyzed them. And so I want to share those results so that you can get a little bit more context in making a decision like this. Is it okay to just stay at 7.5 milligrams or not? So the studies they found were from several sources. One of them was an analysis of drug claims from Medicare and drug claims from private insurance, Optum, and then comparing those people and whether they got certain diagnoses or not, whether they got an infection or other things. So the first one is infections. So they compared what dose the person was receiving. And specifically to answer your question, for this situation, because you're at 7.5 milligrams, they broke it down to 5 milligram increments. And so for people between 5 to 10 milligrams of prednisone per day on Medicare, there was an 11% incidence of infection over 1 year. So basically 1 in 10 people who take it on Medicare, so that means somebody over the age of 65, was likely to get an infection. And then, this is probably more likely relevant to you since you're 47 years old, the Optum private insurance showed an incidence of 8.1%. So it's more like 1 in 12 people who take prednisone between 5 to 10 milligrams per day for a year are likely to get an infection. So that's the first thing to consider. Our infections are more likely when you are taking prednisone long-term at 7.5 milligrams. The second one is bones. So you've already discussed this in your email saying you had osteopenia and now your bone density is normal, which is great. So I suggest you continue checking your DEXA scan. But just so you know the risk, at this dose, your risk is 4.8 fractures per 100 person years. So if 100 people were to take prednisone for a year, 4.8 of them would get a broken bone. And then essentially that's a twofold higher risk of fracture compared to people who don't take prednisone. So you're doubling your risk for breaking a bone. And if you were, and 4.8 people out of 100 years are going to get a broken bone. So that's your risk for a broken bone. And then the third is your heart. They did a study and found that between 5 to 10 milligrams of prednisone, the increased risk is 1.7. The hazard ratio is 1.7, which means a 70% increased risk for heart disease, specifically a 4.8% 1 year cumulative probability of cardiovascular disease. So basically about 5% chance of heart disease at that dose. So those are the 3 big concerns at this dose that I didn't know about, those specific risks at these dose ranges until I went to Harvard to learn about this. So now the research has been done. So it sounds like as a healthcare provider, you are making a choice that is really important. You're aware of these risks now, and you've decided that the quality of life is more important than the quantity of life. And the quality that you were experiencing when just lowering 1 milligram was, as you said, horrendous. So I agree that tapering is not a great strategy for you. And potentially when you are at this point, it may not even be your disease that is the problem. It may actually be like the symptoms you're describing, that withdrawal, may actually just be indicative that you have adrenal insufficiency caused by being on prednisone for so long. They call it glucocorticoid-induced adrenal insufficiency. And that's a legitimately terrifying medical situation of its own. And you need to avoid that. That itself can lead to death. Like if you were to get in a car accident while going through what you described, you may not have enough reserve capacity to deal with that kind of horrific stress. You'd be under, and you might just die of shock because you can't deal with the shock of what you're going through. Sepsis, multi-system organ failure, like that in and of itself is a risk that you need to take into account. So now you know the risk of treatment, heart disease, bones, infections, but the risk of non-treatment is more likely to lead to death, in my opinion. And you're non-functional. You can't do your job. You can't do your exercise. You can't enjoy life. So it's always about balancing the risks and the benefits. You know the risks, you know the benefits. And it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor so you are fully aware of the risks and benefits of treatment versus non-treatment, of lowering doses versus increasing doses. And as one of the professors at this Harvard seminar said, there seems to be a dose where it works and there's no reason to go above that dose. You get no net benefit. So finding that dose is amazing and fantastic, and I'm glad you got there. I'm sad you have an increased risk for these things, but your risk for worse things are also need to be taken into account. So I'm glad you found that dose. I'm glad you are there and you fully have embraced it. I don't think, like I said earlier, no reason to feel ashamed. You are making this decision with eyes wide open. So stay in close contact with your doctor. And for anybody else watching this video, it's always best to get on the lowest effective dose of prednisone that you can tolerate for your disease and preventing withdrawals. And make sure you're working closely with your doctor. Signing off is Dr. Megan, your prednisone pharmacist.